What an excellent conversation I just had with my new friend, Wes Gay. If you've ever struggled with thinking my message is not clear, or I'm not getting enough leads, or I'm not getting enough sales, you need to stop, you need to listen, and you need to take notes. Here is my friend, Wes, talking about how he grew his business and how he's helping others grow theirs. Welcome to Market Mavericks. I'm Matthew Eford. Join me as I speak with leaders who are redefining industries in every corner of the market. From startups to established businesses, we'll uncover the strategies, challenges, and insights that drive success. Get ready to be inspired by the Mavericks who are shaping the future of business. Welcome, everyone, to Market Mavericks. I have my new friend, Wes Gay, with me. Wes and I are part of Iron Forums. And that's a connection that I got with Wes. He's part of one of the local forums here in the Atlanta, Georgia area that is Christian business owners seeking to get out of isolation and get in the community. And so Wes and I met through Iron Forums, and I'm so excited to hear Wes share about this idea of marketing, which can be very daunting for a small business owner or someone who's looking to get into business. So I don't want to give too much away, but Wes, tell us about yourself, who you are, what you do, and the business that you have, kind of what role you play in your business.
Sure. Thanks for having me, first of all. Most companies struggle with marketing and sales because they're actually confusing their audience. So what I do is I'll come in and help them figure out what is the right messaging we need for our overall company, for our marketing, sales, product, services, whatever it is, so that when we do marketing, we do sales, we get more of the right people who will pay more money, stay around the longest, and hopefully become referral sources or raving fans. I've been doing this essentially since 2016. I always tell people I kind of accidentally started my own business. I had been working in churches for a while before that and found a season of about 6 months or so I was unemployed. We had my wife and I had a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old at the time, and was trying anything I could. And I had applied for dozens of jobs in that season. Nothing seemed to pan out. And this Donald Miller guy, who I had remembered from 2005 when you were at Blue Like Jazz, had started a StoryBrand podcast, and he had this company called StoryBrand where he was teaching a marketing framework to people. I knew somebody who had gone through a workshop. He kind of showed me the framework. And they announced this copywriter certification. I didn't know what a copywriter was because I worked in churches. Churches don't have money to spend, much less on copywriters.
Sure.
But I saw him explain it, and then he said he was going to send the people who did it leads. And I was like, well, that sounds great. And my wife said, well, you're a great writer. What if you try that? We'll do this for a few months, figure it out till you get a quote unquote real job. And I said, okay. So go and do that, go to Nashville for 2 days, go through this certification. Probably an hour and a half into day one was the first time in my professional life where I thought, I'm in the right room.
Wow.
Like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing.
So what made that click for you?
I think it was there was a few things. I think, in fact, one, I felt like I was in a role that I wanted to be in. In churches, for the most part, I had worked in kind of media communications because I always joked when I worked in churches, I was responsible for anything with having to do with buttons, knobs, pictures, and words. So I was communications, I was media, IT.
Sure.
I did music some because my dad's a worship pastor and I have an undergrad degree in music. But that's kind of what it was. And those to me, I was always like, well, I always feel like a stepping stone onto something that I felt like I should be doing.
Sure.
But hearing Don Miller explain it and the other guy who was there teaching copywriting, I thought, well, this is how I've essentially always thought. This is how I approached everything I try to communicate anyway. Now it's just formalized and clear as a process I can do. And the people in the room were great. Some of them are still good friends of mine. And it just felt like, okay, now I'm doing the thing that I'm probably meant to do in my life and career. And so that's what it was. And then within 6 weeks of those 2 days, so this is late October 2016, within about 6 weeks, I had a full-time client load, having never really been an entrepreneur before, or worked for myself or started a business, or certainly never been a copywriter.
Wow.
It took me forever to figure out what that actually was.
Yeah, sure. So someone who doesn't know what a copywriter is, what does that specific role look like?
Boy, that is a broad question. I'll keep it short. Really, a copywriter is somebody who's going to come in and just basically write words for your business. Normally, they get used for like email marketing, or they'll get used for website copy, maybe blog articles, that kind of stuff. What I was getting hired to do, for anybody who knows StoryBrand, well, let me explain that first. StoryBrand
let's start with that.
So StoryBrand is a 7-part communication framework that's based off storytelling. So when I do it with companies, I ruin movies for them because it's a movie format. That's all it is. Everything from Top Gun Maverick to all those holiday Hallmark movies. Point for point, it is a repeatable, proven formula that's been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
But StoryBrand is a book, Building a Story Brand, that the new version launches January 2025. And it's a 7-part framework you can use to communicate or clarify any messaging. Normally, when I come in, I'm doing it for an overall company. And then sometimes we'll distill that down into maybe key audiences or products or services, et cetera. So yeah, that's what StoryBrand is. But when people were initially calling me, it was to figure out their messaging. Like, how do we really talk about ourselves in a clear, compelling, concise way? And then how do we reflect that in our marketing, specifically around things like email campaigns, email marketing, website copy, lead generation, that kind of stuff.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So you have this unique experience, right? You start your business.
Yeah.
Within 6 weeks, you kind of got a full client list. So talk us through the first 12 to 24 months. What did that look like? What did it look like learning to be an entrepreneur with you now have clients that are paying you, expecting you to have your system and your stuff together?
Yeah, I don't know that I would recommend the way I did it, which was say yes and then figure out how to do it.
That was a lot of the way we did too. So yeah,
I mean, it was literally early on, one of the first projects I got within a couple of days of being back from the certification. I was texting friends of mine. I said, "Hey, what do you use to send invoices? How do you do this?" Like, I couldn't even figure out how to send an invoice, but I had already agreed to a project and got somebody willing to pay me money for a thing. Like, I should have figured out how to get paid first. But kind of the mentality, and honestly, this is the mentality I still take. I think some people will sit on the sidelines and wait for forever to feel like they have the perfect process or the ideal standard operating procedure or the best proven approach. My theory has always been, let's just get in there and do it, because doing it is the best way to figure out the best way to get it done. And then we can go back and fix it later. Sometimes you're going to have a harder time getting it done because you didn't do it right or didn't really know what you're doing. But I had a client one time who called those things tuition. You're paying tuition.
Yeah.
I
love that.
To learn things. And so the first 12 months, my kind of revenue as a little business owner was 5x what my salary had been at a church.
Wow.
I mean, it literally was taking off like a rocket.
Wow.
It was crazy. I mean, I just couldn't fathom it. And there's so many stories in that time that just are crazy, but it really boiled down to, I just said, I was desperate for one, because we had a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old.
Sure.
We had been in my mother-in-law's house for a while.
Okay.
Needed a place of our own. So there was that kind of desperation. My nature is I always feel like I'm behind. I'm very competitive. And so it was like, I just felt this, I'm always behind competitive thing. It was just always pushing me to go, go, go. Let me just do it, sell stuff, figure it out, and then do whatever it takes to get the work done. So the first 2 years, this was like going into 2017, 2018, it was a lot of just like constant motion. I mean, it was selling, it was showing up, it was doing a lot of work, doing a lot of really cool projects, being in some really unique and situations. About a year into doing it, there was a couple of situations I were in where I thought, I cannot believe I'm there. I had an $80 million company. I was sitting across from the CEO at breakfast one day in a tech company out on the West Coast. And he said, "Hey, I want you to consider being a fractional full-time, basically a full-time consultant for several months to story brand everything in our company, marketing, sales, customer success." He said, basically everything but legal and finance. And I said, great, I'll stay out of those. Happy to.
Yeah, I don't want any part of that.
But I mean, literally, they're an $80 million company. My first day there, I flew out to Seattle my first week. And I'm in the room with the VP of sales, the president of the company, who is essentially a chief revenue officer, the director of sales enablement, which is basically, for people who don't know, B2B companies, a lot of companies will have somebody who basically their full-time job is to create sales collateral for the sales team and train them on it. You get a product or products, you're constantly training a sales team. They had the vice president of customer success, and the chief business development officer, who was also the interim CMO. Now, the C-suite people that were in there had all been in business in those kinds of roles for 20 years or more. The chief biz dev guy, who was interim CMO, is good friends with the current CEO of Microsoft, because 30 years ago they were at Microsoft and they were working on Microsoft Ventures, doing investments all over the world. Like, there were some heavy hitters in that room.
Sure.
So I walk into this room, we sit down there, and they say, "Okay, we've got to redo our sales pitch deck." And they looked at me and they said, "All right, Wes, what do you think?" And I thought, what in the world? A year and a half ago, I was pushing buttons and turning knobs on a soundboard for a church for Sunday services. Like, why are they looking at me? But we did it.
So talk us through, I love Donald Miller. I've followed the podcast. I've got his books. I've got StoryBrand. It's helped a lot of our branding over our organizations. So for those that are not familiar, you said 7-part. Can you give us the 30,000 foot view?
Sure.
When you get asked that question, what do we do? Obviously,
Yeah.
you take them through the brand, you
Hmm.
take them through the messaging. Give the
Yep.
audience 30,000 foot view. What does that look like?
Yeah. So I'll explain the 30,000 foot view and then talk about how we implement it with that company.
Yeah,
So
please.
the story brand framework, there's 7 parts to it. The first thing is, in any great story, you have a character. This is the hero of the story. So let's not overcomplicate it. In Top Gun Maverick, it's Maverick.
Yeah,
Maverick is the hero of that story.
yeah,
Um, and the thing about it is we got to figure out, what does that character want? What is the one thing they're after? Top Gun Maverick, it's all about Maverick wanting to prove he's still an asset to the modern Navy. That's it.
yeah,
We figure that out in the first 8 or 10 minutes. After that, they test fly the Dark Star
yeah, yeah, yeah.
jet or whatever at Mach 10. Like, that's
Mach
what we
10.
figure out. And then he goes in the room with Ed Harris and gets chewed out. Like, that's what we figure out. But then in any great story, we can't just have that. What we're also trying to figure out is, what is the one thing our customers want. But the second thing in any great story is, you got to figure out, what's the problem? What's the obstacle that's going to get in the way of the main hero of the story getting what they want? If there's no obstacle, there's no story. And so we want to see what those obstacles are. What do they have to overcome? What are the internal feelings or the anxieties or stresses? What is the fundamental issue that's really kind of underneath the whole thing? In the Top Gun Maverick, the problem, the surface level problem, is this rogue nation has a uranium enrichment plant and we got to go destroy it. The internal problem is Tom Cruise wondering, is he capable enough to do this?
Yeah,
Can he train this next generation of pilots? But can he also train Goose's son Rooster?
yeah,
We figure all of those things out in the first 15 minutes of the 2-hour film. No wonder it was the biggest movie of 2022,
yeah,
because it followed those beat by beat. The third thing then in a story, and this happens in almost every great movie, is what we call a guide. And a guide is that mentor authority figure. It's Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars. It's Haymitch in the Hunger Games. It's Rafiki in The Lion King. It's Mary Poppins in Mary Poppins. It's Iceman in Top Gun Maverick. It's like the beloved grandmother in every Hallmark holiday movie.
yeah,
They come along, it's Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid, and they say, I understand what you're going through, so I have empathy, but here's why I'm the authority to help you. I'm the trusted advisor, if you will. That's the paradigm shift for brands. When we think about marketing, is what makes you the authority? How do you understand your audience? And how do you present yourself as the vehicle to help them get what they want? So the fourth part in any movie, in any story, in the story brand process, is the plan. This is a 1, 2, 3. How many times have we seen a sequence in a movie where they go, here's the plan.
yeah.
Somebody walks into a room, they clear off the table, they
Yep.
roll out a map, and they say, here's a plan, right? In Top Gun Maverick, it literally, they start that by saying, when Tom Cruise walks in the hangar, throws the flight ops manual in the trash can, I think he even says, so here's the plan.
Yeah.
And what is the plan? We got 2 teams of 2 fight through the valley. First team hits it with the missile. The second team hits it with the missile. Steep climb out of there, dogfight home. 5 things we got to know, right? For us as marketers and in marketing, we got to say, what's the plan? What's the process? What's the sales process look like? A software instance company, and maybe what's the implementation process? Financial advisor, what's the setup process? All those kinds of things. People want to see a step-by-step plan. Well, then it leads to, in a story, what we call the call to action. This is the climactic scene. This is the moment where the guide basically tells the hero to go do the thing. In Top Gun Maverick, it's actually a little bit different, because the climactic scene is when Iceman and Maverick are in Iceman's office.
Yeah.
And he's basically saying, you know what to do, go do it, right? It's that moment. That's in our marketing and sales, we think, what's the clear next step we want people to take? It's not learn more on a website. It's schedule a call, get a quote, buy now, that kind of stuff. All of those things lead to one of 2 outcomes: success, so all of the problems are solved, life is better, everything's great, or failure. None of the problems are solved, the problems are get worse, and we now have a catastrophe on our hands. You take all those elements together with a company, and you filter everything through those things. Now you've got a story you can tell that serves as a great foundation for your sales and marketing. So go back to that tech company. When they say, Wes, what do we do? I'm a little overwhelmed in the moment, because I didn't know that was when we morning,
Sure.
9 a.m.
First,
day
yeah.
one.
Yeah.
I just started asking questions. I said, well, all right, before we get into the sales deck, who's our audience? And they started unpacking that. I was like, okay, great. What are they looking for? Started unpacking that. I was like, okay, great. So we need to open with something like this. What's the biggest problem that we think people have as it relates to what we sell? And they said it. And I was like, great. There's slide 1. Let's start with a problem. They're like, really? I said, yes. I said, okay. And I said, but what's causing that problem? And they started talking about some cultural things they've seen. The sales guy was chiming in with what they're seeing in the market, that kind of things. And I said, great. What are some of the feelings or frustrations you think the audience is having? They start answering those questions. It's like, great, there's slides 2, 3, and 4, or whatever it was. They're like,
Sure.
really? Yeah. And I said, we need to have a pivot. What is our fundamental belief here? What is the core reason why we think these problems should not exist in the world? That became a slide on its own. And then we pivoted to explain who the company was, and then went through a demo of the product and gave a plan of how it works. Here's the next steps, etc. Before that, their deck was like title slide. The second one was, here's a list of all of our awards. And
Yeah.
most of them were things that sounded made up.
Yeah.
Right? It sounded like they were AI generated. Like, these don't sound like a real award. And then there was some other things they had too. It's like, nobody understands what this means, and nobody cares. I think I may have even said, because I often say this, like, I'm sure your mother is very proud of all those awards, but your customers do not care.
Yeah.
Because the paradigm shift most businesses do not make is they forget that no customer woke up this morning and thought, man, I can't wait to hear some other company's story. What they woke up to say is, I have a problem. I'm looking for somebody to help me solve that problem. Who's going to help me solve that problem? Right. And so when we filter everything through that, we create a lot of clarity that's really compelling, that draws more of the right people in.
Sure. So one of the ideas is you make the customer the hero, right? You mentioned about that so many businesses like to be the hero. They like to be the savior, but instead we could be the guide that takes the customer, the hero, from the plan, take them through. So give us an example of that. Give us an example of a organization that most everybody would know, and kind of pick that apart for us. I know we've done that with movies, but show that in the local kind of marketing, how that works.
Well, an organization everybody would know is Allstate. So, we're in the middle of football season when we're recording this, and those Allstate Mayhem commercials are everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Because that whole campaign is brilliant. Like, it's one of the best campaigns ever created. But what does Allstate say? If you were to map it out in that same story, what do you want? You want to have coverage for your car, or you want to know you're protected in your car. But the problem is mayhem, right? They do a great job of positioning mayhem as the problem. And that character will even kind of spell out some of the problems. Years ago, Allstate wasn't just the guide. They had President Palmer from 24 was the guide, right?
Yeah.
And so, a very stately, great baritone voice. He's very believable. You trusted him, etc. And he was the guide. What was the plan? Well, the plan was like the Allstate plan, or whatever they called it. The call to action was basically find an agent. So success was you avoid mayhem, or failure is you let mayhem take over your life, right? That's one. Another great example is CarMax.
Okay.
Nobody likes buying and selling cars. It's not fun. It's hard. It takes forever. You just feel like it just is impossible.
Sure.
I mean, CarMax says, well, what do people want? They want to buy or sell a car easily, right? That's what you and I all want. But the problem is, buying and selling cars is hard. It takes forever. You don't trust the salespeople. You feel like the pricing is hidden, right? We know all the things they cover. They address. So CarMax is the guide. They understand it, and here's why how they're gonna help you. If you go to their website right now, I mean, I went 2 weeks ago and saw it, to .com/buy or CarMax.com/sell. It literally has a plan, a step 1, step 2, step 3 for how to buy or sell a car. We sold a car to CarMax probably 8 or 9 years ago. From the time I pulled into the parking lot to the time I left with a check in hand was like 20 minutes.
Wow.
And I remember leaving thinking, this doesn't feel legal. Like, this feels too easy.
Yeah.
Because 2 years after that, we bought a car, and we bought another car. We broke down and finally bought a minivan at that point. This was 2018, 2019. We had gone online to a local Honda dealer, found the exact car we wanted, and said, okay, we want to go. That's the one I think we want. So we go to the dealer. Sales guy comes out. How can I help you? We want to test drive that one. He goes, great. We get the keys, test drive it. Great. This is what we're looking for. 4 hours later, we got home.
Yeah.
This is dumb. So they make it really easy. A 1, 2, 3. And obviously the call to action is buy, sell, or even find a car on their website if you're there, and then success and failure. So those are some kind of big brands that I think do it really, really well.
I love that. So talk to us about your organization. Is it just you? Have you built a team? Like how have you progressed since 2016, even since 2017, having that crazy meeting out on the West Coast with that technology company? What has been kind of the life cycle of your business?
Yeah. So this answer is maybe not what you're looking for, but we'll dive in a little bit, because I know we got people who are small business owners and kind of aspiring solopreneurs wanting to start your own business, etc. One of the challenges I think into entering any industry, especially if you're the person behind it, is deciding what business model you want. In the marketing world, everybody thinks, I just got to be an agency, which means I got to be full service and we got to do all the things and hire all the people and have hourly rates and all that stuff. I have very good friends that are very close friends of mine. I think I'm getting group texts from them, right? I've been getting them off and on all day from them that are agency owners, and they do that stuff. And there's a temptation to say, well, I probably have to go do that.
Sure.
And you can, but I think there's more people need to realize there's a kind of feel the freedom of, you don't have to. The great thing about this country and really building a business is you can kind of build it the way you want to and figure out maybe it's what fits your strengths better, or maybe what fits your goals better, or what you're trying to accomplish better. So my encouragement to everybody would be, you don't have to pick the path that you feel like everybody else just does. There are 100 ways to do any kind of business. I have tried off and on over the years. I've tried it several different times to figure out, do I go do the agency thing, right? I'm saying yes to all the ongoing maintenance or the website stuff, or kind of ongoing more traditional agency type work.
Sure.
And I realized I hated it. And it just didn't fit me, and it didn't really fit my strengths or where I wanted to focus. So my structure is actually pretty simple. It's me. I've got an assistant. I've got a bookkeeper. And then anytime I need executional things, we don't do a ton of websites, because a lot of times when I get brought in, it's more of like a fractional CMO model, which, if people are not familiar with that, basically I come in, we'll usually spend a day with a team, get clear on their messaging, build a marketing and sales strategy. And then my job is to kind of sit in the decider seat and help them make decisions and build out plans. And I'll sometimes help them execute, write content, whatever. But that's mostly what it is. When it comes to building websites, which happens occasionally, I've got people that I kind of basically subcontract with. So I'm more like a general contractor.
Sure.
Because that's just the model I prefer, and it fits me better, and kind of where I'm headed. It'll be more of it's still essentially a consultancy. So that's where I'm at. And that's my focus is more on, how do I now grow a consultancy? Because honestly, that's where I'm much better fit. And I think where I can be the most value.
I love that. And I love that you found what works for you, right? I totally agree. You don't have to be all things, all people. That So many businesses die from that, because they try to continue to add on service lines that just distract them from their main. So talk to me about that.
Yeah.
How do you give consult on a business who's like, we're going to grow and we just have to add new service lines?
Boy, those are my favorite ones. Because, it's like there'll be a company that's doing, say, $1.5 million in sales. I go, oh, we got to go add 4 more products. And I want to go, do you? I don't think we do. There's one of the myths that I see quite often is the fact that, our revenue is stalled, or sales are down, or we're trying to grow. We got to go add 17 new things. One of the things that I have found be so successful in so many different industries is to first figure out what's actually making the most money. One of the questions I'll often ask people is, if they have multiple products or services, I want to know what they are. And then I'll ask them, like, hey, rank those for me in terms of revenue.
Sure.
And that whole 80-20 thing plays out. I had a client one time that was in, they were a B2B company that did drilling. So like if a company was going to go build a bridge over the, Mobile Bay in Mobile, Alabama, or they wanted to build a tall skyscraper, they needed to see what was 200 feet down, they would call this company to go do that work. And so I'm on the call with them, and I'm asking these questions just to get an understanding of how the business works. What do you do? How do you sell it? And I said, what do you do? And she said, well, we have 5 things we do. She rattles them off. And then I said, okay, of those 5 things, can you rank those for me in terms of revenue, top to bottom? She said, oh yeah, that's easy. She said, the first thing, which was drilling, does about $4 million a year. And she said, the other 4 services are about $250 each. And I said, wait a second. It's literally 80-20. She goes, yeah. I said, so 20% of your services are 80% of your revenue? She said, yeah. I said, well, who buys those other 4 things? And she said, it's you. It's almost always people who did the drilling thing first. And I'm thinking, and I remember thinking, I'm going to look like a genius for saying something what is very obvious.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, okay, 2 things. One, your marketing needs to focus exclusively on getting new drilling customers. And I said, 2, we need to figure out, how do we create plans to upsell people more easily? Because your greatest opportunity is in the upsells, right? If the people who are buying drilling are buying all this other stuff, let's just go sell more of that other stuff. And the third thing I said was, how much is a drilling rig? She said, it's about $1 million all in, which is, I don't even know how that works. I still don't know how that works.
Yeah.
And she said, and I said, well, if you filled up the schedule of a rig over 12 months, about what is that in revenue? She said, about $3 million. And I said, have you thought about buying another drill? And she said, do you really think so? She said, we've talked about that for years and can't decide. And I thought, I'm just saying, I'm not going to convince you to spend $1 million. What I am saying is, we don't necessarily have to go spend a ton of money on marketing. We can get really clear on our messaging, reorganize and reprioritize, and then focus on creating clearer upsells. So what I would say to everybody is, more than likely, there's a very small chance you need to go add more services or products. There's a very good chance you've got to figure out, where do you get the most customers from, and what do you usually sell first and sell the most? You figure out those two things, and then your next question ought to be, how do we go do more of those two, get more of those people from those places, and go sell more of that first thing?
Yeah.
You're going to grow just to do that. I have another company that I work with for a couple of years now. Last year, I'm on a call with them, with their president, their CEO. And I said, hey, what's your sales close rate? And the VP of sales on there too. They said it's about 33%. I said, okay. We're trying to break that down to figure out what lies behind that number.
Sure.
They did about $4.5 million in 2023. And a week later, I said, do you have that broken down by lead source? And they didn't. And so they came back a week later on our next call, and the CEO said, hey, we actually did a review based on your question about lead source. We figured out our referrals convert at a 78% rate, close rate. And I said, hey, here's a dumb question. How do we go get more referrals? I'm not trying to fix stuff that's broken. I'm trying to elevate stuff that's working. And so it's much easier to pour gas on a fire than to start a new fire.
Sure.
And so sure enough, that became the problem to solve. And so we figured out they tripled the number of inbound referrals they got last year, over the last 12 months. They'll finish this year between 6 and 6.5 million. And the bulk of that has been, we just figured out we got more focused on who are the people most likely to say yes. How do we go get more of those people? And that was it.
And what you're saying, I mean, focus and clarity is such a gift. It's a gift to you as a business owner. It's a gift if you have a team. It's a gift to your team. It's a gift to your customers because they know exactly what you're doing. We found out in the lighting space. So one of our businesses in our franchise system is Christmas lights. That's our bread and butter. Our bread and butter inside of that is commercial Christmas lights. The reason that we do that is because the back end of the schedule gets filled with residential because we're doing the commercial work. We get the referrals that pull off of it. So you see way too many organizations in the lighting space that they're chucking a truck, they do 15 things, and they happen to do Christmas lights, and they start marketing for residential Christmas lights in August, which is totally fine. They're spending a ton of money, and they're missing a lot of opportunity. And we just continue to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And then the back end of our schedule fills with residential because we're doing great commercial jobs these people are going to. So I love that you're pulling that out. So how does a business owner, how do they take some time? Like, what are some questions that they could ask themselves? Let's say that they're, obviously we want to give your information at the end. I definitely want them to be able to connect with you. But prior to that, what's a question or two that they can ask themselves to help give some clarity around their messaging and their audience?
Yeah, great question. So there's an exercise I often do with teams, and it's let me back up and let me get on my soapbox for just a second. Sure. I do not like the ideal client profile and persona thing in businesses. I see it a bunch because it usually is meant to make people feel good internally in a company than actually be a useful asset to help you see it and learn anything. And it's usually in hypotheticals. So one of the exercises that I'll do is what I call the ideal client story. And anybody can go do this. You bring your leadership team, take an hour or two. You might be surprised what comes up. This is the question, or kind of the prompt. Think about the last 12 or 24 months. You can pick your time horizon and think about all your clients. Because your clients and customers are not your children, you get to pick your favorites.
Sure.
And the favorites they were the easiest to sell. They got the most value out of what you do. And they either became repeat customers, raving fans, or referral sources. Who are those people? Now describe them. Think about the story. How did they find you? Where did they find you? What was the sales process like? Who was the person who came to you? What was their decision process like? How did they say yes? What did you do for them? What was the most valuable for them? What was the next step after that initial engagement? Start to really reflect on that story.
Sure.
Because when you do that, you're going to figure out, okay, we actually match really well with people who are looking for this thing. I go back to the StoryBrand. This is what they want. This is what a great fit client wants. Then you also talk about, you think into the sales process, what was their struggle? What was not true, or what were they dealing with in their lives that prevented them from getting what they wanted? Right. And now you're unpacking it. I was in Dallas last year in 2023, leading a 2-day offsite for this nonprofit. And I had sent them this question ahead of time. So they were all excited because they were well prepared. And they said, hey, can we do the ideal question? I said, sure. This is the first morning of day one. And we jumped right in. It was like, hey, we got 2 examples. Okay, great. Who are they? Well, we got, I don't know, I forget the guy's name. It was like John in Atlanta. It's like, great. Tell me about John in Atlanta. And they start walking through why John in Atlanta was so fabulous. And then they said, hey, we've got, it's like Dave in St. Louis. I was like, great. What do we love about Dave in St. Louis? And at first, I pretty quickly realized there was a little bit different way they talked about Dave in St. Louis versus John in Atlanta. And then they're unpacking both stories, explaining why they loved and what they did, answering all my questions. And there's a pause. And the chief strategy officer of this nonprofit says, I don't think Dave in St. Louis is a good fit for us. And it was like the record scratched and the room stopped. And Zach Morris walked up and said, timeout. Like
Wow.
it was a shift in the room. And I said, and the head marketing guy was just like, his face froze. And I said, tell me more about that. And she said, well, here's the thing. So we love Dave. He was great. She said, but they didn't really buy into what we did. And she rattles off like 5 more reasons why it was a pain to work with his organization. And I said, and then somebody else was like, yeah, that made a lot of sense. I was actually thinking that, but didn't know how to say it out loud. Then what happened was over the course of another 20, 30 minutes, we actually unpacked why Dave in St. Louis and his team were not a great fit, but what specifically made John in Atlanta a great fit.
Cool.
And so then we were able to give specifics. So now it really clarified our marketing and their efforts, the things they're doing. They did like workshops and trainings for their organizations. And so it became a real clarity thing. So that's the first thing I would say. And then the other thing I would ask is, what problem are we solving for people? Like, what is the thing that when people wake up in the morning really drives them bananas as it relates to what we do? If you're Mosquito Joe franchise, like, you're not selling to anybody who loves mosquitoes.
No.
Which I don't think there are those people, but like,
but that's a good point.
But like, you're selling to people who hate mosquitoes and are tired of them and they're pain because they want to play outside, but they can't because they feel like there are so many mosquitoes. And the ones in Georgia are so big, they're going to carry them away.
That's right.
That's the people you want to sell to, right?
Yeah.
So what problem are you solving for? You figure those 2 things out, your kind of ideal client story and the problem you solve, you're going to be ahead of every other competitor in your space.
I love that. What excellent advice. So, Wes, talk to us about mistakes you've made, right? We love to learn from somebody's mistakes. You alluded to one earlier about trying to go the agency route and coming back and forth. I mean, it makes sense, right? It's recurring revenue. That is a hot button issue for a lot of people. Recurring revenue is really nice. It is a longer term runway with the client that you have more long-term relationship with them, that you're extracting quote unquote more value out of them because you're giving more value to them long-term. You've gone away from that. So let me stop there.
Sure.
How have you found success in this idea of consistently keeping your pipeline full? Because you haven't gone the agency route. You've said, I'm not going to do the reoccurring. I'm just going to do kind of one consult as I go because it fits my personality. Tell us about the business structure of that. How have you organized your sales process to support that?
Yeah, great question. So I actually do have recurring revenue. It's not an agency deliverables. So it's not like we'll write 5 articles a month and 20 social media posts. It's more of in the strategic advisor space.
Cool.
Okay. And so that is recurring. I have several of those. But in terms of pipeline, I mean, it really boils down to you've got to consistently, and this goes back to what I do, but also a big mistake I've made over the years. It's consistently show up and be the person who's known for solving problems.
Okay.
In a particular problem in your space. So for example, I stole it from a client. I've got a client right now that does workshops and coaching for residential real estate agents. And I've sat through their workshop. It's great. I've read the book by the founder. They're great people. I've done a bunch of stuff with them over the last 6 months. And they have a system for residential real estate agents that they teach specifically about how do you keep your own residential real estate pipeline full? Because that world can be brutally hard.
Yeah.
And I watched him teach it. I read it in the book, and I went back probably 6 months ago and started doing it for myself. And that has helped me a ton.
Wow.
The number one thing I think that kills businesses is obviously no money. So you've got to wake up every day. There's 2 or 3 questions I tell everybody who starts their own business or has their own business they need to ask every single day. What do I need to do to get paid today? So what can I literally close in the next 24 hours? What do I need to do to get paid tomorrow? Now, that tomorrow time horizon can be the next 24 hours, 48 hours, next week, next month, next quarter, whatever.
Sure.
And you kind of vary the time horizon as you think about it. The third question is, how do I get a little bit better at what I do today? Right? So you start asking those 3 questions every single day. And it is that compounding. We talk about compound interest. It's kind of a compound effects of your result of effort.
Sure.
And so you got to ask yourself every single day, what am I doing to get somebody a little further into the pipeline? What am I doing to get new people in the pipeline? What can I do to open myself up to new opportunities? I mean, I've got a call next, as we're talking, I got a call next week with a guy about a huge partnership that could open me up to a giant pipeline. But those are relationships you have to nurture. Again,
Sure.
that how do I get paid tomorrow? That's a like next quarter version of the question tomorrow. So that's it. So for me, it's about relationships. It's all relationships and referrals for me in some of my own efforts that I do. But it's about showing up. How do I solve problems? How do I make it easy for people and find people who are needing what I sell?
Yeah.
And talk about it, and then have the initial engagement. And the other thing I would say a lot of people struggle with too is I see this a ton with people like me, kind of consultants, outsiders, agencies, whatever, even solopreneurs or people who want to start their own thing. Is you got to think through what you sell and how you sell it. So I have two different ways you can start with me depending on a couple of factors. And when I get on a call, I usually can navigate and figure out which one of those two paths we need to go. I'll pitch that. That's it. And then if they want to do more, I can walk them through, here's additional options when we get to that into that phase one. So it becomes a really easy sales process. So you can sell into a longer term thing as opposed to just trying to do, hey, let me go and give you a year plan up front. It's like, whoa, now.
Yeah, that's a big commitment.
Well, I just never know if I'm going to do the right. I don't know what I'm going to need in a year without having to spend some time with a company. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a company thinking I knew where their marketing and sales should go. And then as we got into it, I realized or find out something that goes, oh, we actually need to focus there. Like if you want to make more money, let's go do that instead of that. I thought we should do that. We really should do this.
I love that.
So,
yeah, that's excellent advice, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
One of the things that we love to learn about is how people have leveraged mentorship, networking. Obviously, you're talking about networking, building your pipeline. Well, let's take it on the mentorship route. How have you leveraged mentorship as an entrepreneur to grow yourself and grow your organization?
Yeah. There's a good friend of mine down in St. Augustine, Florida, owns an agency, and he always talks about you need several people in your life. You need somebody who can walk on kind of the same place where you are. You need somebody who's further ahead than where you are, and there's somebody who's kind of behind where you are.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've kind of got for lack of a better term, parallel mentors. Like I've got like I mentioned this group text thing earlier. It's a group of guys that are all own agencies or businesses in the marketing world. We're all good friends, and I learn a ton from them. I'll text sometimes. A lot of times, it's just nonsense and memes and jokes.
Sure.
That's what it is. That's what group texts are now. But then a lot of us will have questions like, "Hey, I'm thinking about hiring this guy. Hey, we're having this problem with our own marketing and sales. What do you guys recommend?" So that's been great. And I've got other people over the years that I've met and learned from, and they are further ahead than where I am, and they have gone much further down the road. So I just try to build relationships with them, keep it super casual, just ask questions. I've got a guy, he sold his business 2 years ago for $100 million.
Wow.
He lives relatively close to me, and I text him every now and then. We've hung out a couple of times. I've done some work for his new ventures he's involved with. I just ask him questions, and I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to be rude. I just like to ask really good questions to help learn, because I figure they say failure is the best teacher, but it's really great when it's somebody else's failure.
Sure.
And you can kind of bypass it. I was with this guy a couple months ago asking him some questions, and I said, flashback to 10 years ago before you sold your company. What would you have been doing 7 or 8 years before you sold that you think would have made your exit much bigger? And he said, without skipping a beat, he gave me 3 things. So what did I do? I wrote those things down real big.
Yeah.
Like if I want to exit, I should do this because he's done it and he's where I'd like to be.
Yeah. That is, I love that you've brought that out, right? I mean, you look to where you want to go, and it's such an easier path to get there when you have somebody who's guiding you along that path, and you have someone who's done what you want to do, and you sit in the room with them. And instead of, so often entrepreneurs want to toot their horn, they want to talk about how good they are, and it's like, this guy you're sitting with sold his business for $100 million. Why don't you shut your mouth and ask some good questions and just listen?
Yeah. And this sounds so name droppy braggy, but like I was out speaking at an event a few weeks ago and had dinner with another guy I know who sold his company for $100 million. I only know 2 guys. I just happened to speak to both.
We got them both in this conversation. That's okay.
Yeah, we did. And so, but it's like, those are the kind of guys that are great relationships. They obviously know a ton. And even at dinner, I knew a lot of his story because I had been part of it. He had been a client of mine at one point. But there was all kinds of things I learned that was just fascinating. And it's like, it's a great relationship. It's somebody you learn from and lean on. Another thing I would say for business owners specifically and entrepreneurs is find mentors who are or have been business owners and entrepreneurs, because boy, there's a different set of things you got to deal with and wrestle with and learn that nobody else understands.
Yeah.
We all talk about failure and struggle, but what happens if, I'm optimistic about revenue. So I always ask things like, what if this works? I literally had this conversation with a client last week and I said, hey, here's a crazy thing. What if all this stuff we're doing actually works? How much of a problem is that going to cause for you? Like operationally?
What a fantastic question.
I know. And so sometimes we feel ashamed if our business is doing well or we're making a little more money, because it's awkward to talk about making a little more money at church.
Sure.
Or it's awkward to talk about being a business owner and taking an owner's draw and being able to do a little bit more than most people. And I've been there. So one of the ways I leverage mentors is just asking those kinds of questions that you almost can't ask in public, right? You can't post it on Facebook for recommendations like it's, hey, what's the best pancake restaurant in Pigeon Forge?
Pancake Pantry, by the way. It's in Gatlinburg.
Which one?
The Pancake Pantry in Gatlinburg is the best, but that's just
pretty
my
great.
opinion.
I mean, it's almost honestly hard to go wrong up there with pancakes. But it's like you find people who have been ready to go to have those really candid conversations that even in our hyper-connected world are really hard to have. But they're the things that you really want to know, because they're going to help you be better and sharper as you level up your business. Because there's a reality. What happens? Your business, well, you own a couple of businesses, and 1 year, all of a sudden, you take home $200,000 or $300,000, and you've never done that, and you're like, whoa, now, we got to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And so my biggest thing on mentors is like find people who have been very successful and further down the road and gone through all the hardships, and just ask them some of the hard questions.
Love that.
Now, I've asked people who've been really successful in business, hey, how have you managed it as a dad and a husband? Like, how did you navigate it with your kids? What are some of the things that you were able to leverage your business to help, as you raised your kids? I mean, just all kinds of stuff.
Sure. So as a dad, how are you navigating that? How are you navigating that pull? Because, balance is a myth, right? I mean, nothing's ever in perfect balance. So how is you as a dad, are you navigating the pull between your business that's growing, speaking opportunities that you're getting in your home life?
Yeah. Yeah. Balance is a balance is a myth, particularly for business owners, because as an owner, nobody's thinking about your business every day like you are, because it all stops with you, stops with you. And so and there's this like anti-hustle culture, which I get, which is just chaotic and frantic movement. There's also this increased culture, I feel like, to work a lot less, like 30 hours a week. And I grew up a lot of blue collar areas. That to me doesn't feel right at all. I've kind of embraced the fact that I somewhat live in a productivity tornado.
Okay.
And it just is what it is, and there's no balance. There's a blend. So like today, as we record this, I was getting ready to work, and my wife was taking our youngest to preschool, and said, hey, the tire light is on, which it was on yesterday, and I thought I fixed it. Well, I had to take her car to Costco this morning to get the tire fixed. It cost me $11. I don't know how they make any money off of that, but that's another story.
Yeah, it's a whole different story. But yeah,
I agree. But anyways, it's like, and now I have flexibility because I can go there. There's a coffee shop by the Costco where I went, so I can go work there for an hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever it was. But there's the flexibility there, which I can embrace, which the flip side of that means, there's a lot of nights I'm sitting down, we're watching TV, I'm answering emails, but like, I don't care. That's how I've kind of embraced it. My kids actually have no idea what I do. They think I just make a Zoom call all day. Like they literally think if I'm not on Zoom, I'm not working, because I work from home or I travel to be with clients some.
Yeah.
But that's how I've done it. And it's honestly like, even when we go on vacation, we've been Disney World pass holders for a few years. When we go to Disney or we go on a Disney cruise or whatever we do, Dollywood pass holders as well. I mean, I realize I probably should be offline more, but if it's a Friday, I'm probably going to check in once or twice with my assistant, check Slack we use to communicate, see if there's anything on fire. If there's nothing on fire, I don't think anything twice about it.
Yeah.
That's how it just works for me.
Yeah, I love that. I'm similar in that it's hard to turn it off, but there is a level of flexibility that business ownership can allow for you, but you have to design it that way. You have to build the infrastructure to support it. And that's crucial. And one of the things that you said earlier was about the building the business that you want, right? If you want more of the flexibility, you need to organize your business that way. Maybe you may need to not do a new service line because it's going to require the next 24 months of your life that you have to be on the clock every single day, and you're just not willing to give up the next 2 years of your life. Okay, you need to make some of those decisions that way. At
Yeah.
least take them through a questionnaire
Mhm.
to consider them.
Yeah. And you know, this isn't the topic of this conversation, but I think a lot of business owners really have to have the hard conversation of what actually is the highest profit? Like, where do we actually make money? you
Yeah,
know,
bigger is
because
not always better.
exactly. And sometimes it's just like, sometimes better is just better. Like, we've got to figure out how to do things better. There's been seasons in my life where, and I'm kind of in one right now, just very busy, a lot of new leads. Between now and the end of the year, I might be in 4 different cities. I'm not sure yet.
Wow.
Um, yeah, one of them is like upstate New York. And I told him, I was like, do y'all not have an office in Miami? Like, I don't want to go to upstate New York in December.
Yeah,
I know I'm not
it's
built for
getting
this.
cold. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, Atlanta makes national news if there's a hint of snow. Like, I don't need I don't need upstate New York in December. Anyways, you just kind of embrace it, but you also look at it and say, when I get busy, how is this an opportunity to keep kind of sowing the seeds to make sure I stay busy? But
Sure.
also, how is this a great time to invest in maybe a system, a new tool, bringing somebody to help me so I can do more of the things that are working? Because there's things in my business that I know when I do them, they work really well. I've gotten streamlined now because I've done it so much over the years that I just say, how do I keep doing more of this? Because it's a higher margin, it's more profitable, easier to scale. Some people just want to go sell stuff. They look at top line and not bottom line. Like, that's not a great way to run things.
Amen. So talk to us just for a minute about that, because we've talked about on this podcast before that profit is oxygen to your business and to you as an owner. Give us a little bit of information about how you've learned to focus more on the bottom line than just the top line revenue.
Sure. Yeah. So this could be a whole pricing conversation too, especially if you're in a service-based business like what I am, where you're kind of in knowledge work kind of services. But you always want to think about how much money am I actually making? So when I get revenue, and somebody pays me money at the end of the month based on all my expenses, look at the bottom, what is that net operating amount? And that's the number we got to look at, which means sometimes you got occasionally, probably once a quarter, maybe twice a quarter, go back and look and say, what's filling the gap between top and bottom? And I've got clients right now, whereas they look at it, they actually are going line by line and say, okay, we've got customers or clients that are actually not profitable for us.
Yeah.
We're either break even or like very small single digits. So there's actually, talking about making fun of new services. I got one client, we have actually created a new product, a new service essentially, that is specifically for those low margin clients because it's actually a better fit for them. But moving over to this other thing becomes a much higher margin because of how we designed it.
Yeah, cool.
Sometimes you got to rethink it, but you have got to do it. This guy, that's one of the guys I mentioned that sold his business for 100 million. They operated at a 20% net profit margin for over a decade. And he said, we were fanatical about it.
Wow.
He said, fanatical. He said, because we knew if we had 20% margins, it allows us to do a few things. One, have a great consistent valuation when we were ready to exit over a decade or 12 years after they started. Two, he said it allowed us to have predictably every month as we grew based on our revenue, what our net margins were each month. So we knew, my wife and I, as a family, how much we could take out of the business as owners' draws.
Sure.
But also how much we could have available to reinvest back into the business. So we didn't have to go take out loans or get investors. We could reinvest in the business because our margins were so strong. I think too many businesses, and you see this a lot with startups and some of these other things, these hotshot people raising a ton of money, but for the overwhelming majority of businesses, you've got to think, what are we doing and selling to actually optimize for how much money we get to keep?
It's amazing how often somebody will chase the top line revenue and that they won't be willing to tell someone no. We said it earlier about know your lane, right? And know your lane and crush your lane. And that's where you'll find so much more profit, so much more value. You'll be able to provide more value to your clients because you're not chasing other things that are off your lane. It's so rocky over here. It's so hilly over here. There's potholes. There's all these things that you don't realize are over there. And if you would just stay in your lane, it's tried and true. You know where your lane is. You know this service line. You know you can provide an excellent, superior quality service in this line. Just go crush that line.
I mean, I talked to a guy 2 days ago. He knows a friend of his has a spray insulation company, which sounds so uncool. They'll do $7 million in sales this year.
Yeah. Oh, it doesn't surprise me at all.
With zero marketing, no website. Yeah. You can't even find them on Google My Business. Like, wow. It's bonkers.
Wow.
But like, that's what I think some people who are starting a business or trying to get into starting a company, there's a mindset shift you have to have of like, oh, there's a lot of people in this country who make several $1 million a year in sales, and they take home quite a bit. But like, yeah. There is opportunities for everybody. And I think for a lot of people, particularly people like you and I are believers, it sometimes feels weird.
Sure.
But the reality is, and I've decided where I land on that is, hey, as I grow my business and I make more money and have more net margin, what does that allow me to do? Well, now I can hire people. Hire who? Hire people who I think are good people. I can pay them probably more than what maybe industry standard might be, so they can provide for their families and have better quality of life. I help businesses grow and make more money so they can do the same thing for their people, and they can invest in causes they care about. I got clients who invest in all, they reinvest profits back in. I got one in Georgia. They reinvest a percentage of profits back to some kind of Georgia program for kids aging out of foster care. That's a huge need.
Sure.
So there's a part of me is like, man, if I can help them make more money, they're going to give more money to this. Like, you know what I mean? And so how do we use money to further opportunities and make people's lives better?
Yeah. Yeah. It is definitely a mentality shift of looking at your business as an opportunity. You know, I say with our organizations, my businesses are an avenue for ministry, relationally and financially. And so that's the lens at which, the perspective at which I look at my organization. And so I say, I can have an impact in the community. I can have an impact in all of my employees' lives. All the tax revenue, all the things that they're able to buy, all the businesses that they're able to support because of the revenue that we bring in and the pay that they take home. Mm-hmm. But then our organization gets to sponsor, gets to support me Hannah and I as a family, all the things that we get to do because of the profit that our business has. And if it doesn't have profit, but kind of putting a bow on that, if we're not watching our numbers, if we're not watching our margins, if we're just chasing the top line revenue, I have a mentor say, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big thing. I mean, in my world as a marketer, when I come in as marketing, people think, oh, you're going to build a website, run paid ads. No. What my end of the day goal is, this is real unspiritual. But I come in and say, what do we need to say and do to help you make more money?
Sure.
That's it. And so from that perspective, then it opens the door to a lot of questions. We obviously do messaging, which informs marketing and sales strategy, that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's really about, from a business standpoint, what do we need to reorganize? What do we need to focus on? What do we maybe need to change in order to make sure we're really focused on what are we saying and doing that's going to bring more people in who will be more ready to buy so that we can grow this business? That's really my job.
I love it. Well, Wes, man, I appreciate your time. I've taken too much of it. This has been a fantastic conversation. We will definitely have you back. If someone is interested in getting to know you more or really look at working with you, they say, I'm my business, either small business, large business, solopreneur, I'm looking to clarify my messaging, and I want to talk with Wes. I want to bring him on as a CMO, fractional CMO, or just an initial consult. How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, it's real complicated. Go to wesgay.com. That's WESGAY.com. You can see more about what I do. There's also a place to sign up. I send out a weekly email, and it's really just to help you be better at marketing and sales, to help you figure out how to better clarify and solve problems in those areas. Or you can just email me directly, wes@wesgay.com. And if you do that, I'll send you a thing that's going to further break down that ideal client story process I mentioned. Love I got a guide I can send you from just wes@wesgay.com, or see more about me on my website at wesgay.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you, Wes. I appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you being on here. Everybody, thank you for joining us on Market Mavericks. We'll see you soon. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Market Mavericks. We hope you're walking away inspired and ready to take your own adventure to the next level. Don't forget to follow the show to keep up with our latest episodes. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe, share it with others who could benefit. And hey, if you know a market maverick who has a story that needs to be heard, please drop their name in the comments. We would love to bring their insights to the show. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and leading with purpose.